We're going to move right into the next session, and Linda Doherty from PHMSA is going to come up here, and she and I are going to talk about a lot of the same issue that was just discussed. I'm going to see if I can actually figure out what it is we're doing here. And I understand there was a glitch in the webcast for a while. Is the webcast up and going again? Not right now. So the people that were warning me about that, they're working on it. All right. As I said, I picked pithy titles for a lot of these sessions. So this one this morning that Linda and I are going to talk about a little bit is, with all the high-profile incidents and calls by so many different people for improved regulations, what's the holdup? And Ms. Quarterman kind of addressed that already about the length of time it takes to get a regulation through. I'm going to talk a little bit about, why the public's concerned about the holdup and why, the public thinks there's a need for new regulations. And then I think Linda's going to go through the laundry list of everything that PHMSA is working on. So just real quickly, there have been many, many high-profile incidents in the last few years. And so the public wonders, doesn't that point to the need for new regulations? And just to be more specific, there's been multiple failures on older types of pipelines that have long been identified as there's a need for replacement, mainly old types of cast iron pipe. The mayor from Allentown is going to be talking later, and his community was severely impacted by one of these. Doesn't that mean that there should be, required replacement programs? That's one of the questions the public's asking. There's been multiple failures on older types of vintage-style welds and coatings that have been identified for years and years that there's a higher risk of these types of pipelines. Doesn't that show that we need more prescriptive regulations or clear dates when certain types of pipes are replaced? That's something we're hearing from the public over and over again. There's been multiple incidents where the operators made incorrect risk decisions. They had pipes in the ground and they made incorrect decisions about those risks. Or those decisions they made were based on faulty information. Doesn't that point to the need for more prescriptive regulations telling the industry exactly what they should be looking at in their pipelines? There's been multiple incidents where operators had previously used, the sophisticated smart pigs to look for incidents, and then the pipes failed after using the smart pigs. Does that tell us something that the smart pigs aren't really as smart as people claim? Or does that tell us that some of the industry are not using the correct smart pigs? And does that point to the need for different regulations? There's been multiple incidents where problems in the operation plans of companies have been identified after the incident. Federal or state inspectors had inspected those companies, had not found those problems in those plans of operations until after something happened. Does that point something about the efficacy of the government oversight of pipelines these days? There's been multiple incidents where leak detection and or valves did not sufficiently minimize the damage by shutting things down. Does that point to, some more specific thing? Does that point to the need for better standards in those types of incidents? Much of the integrity management system that both hazardous liquid and gas transmission pipelines use are based on kind of a performance-based regulation. And for the public and for others who haven't really thought about the difference between performance-based versus prescriptive regulations, performance-based is kind of like if you were going down the interstate highway and instead of a speed limit sign, you just saw a sign that said drive safely. And it would be left up to the driver to decide what that means. And that might work fine. Drivers might take that to heart and drive safely. Currently on our roads, we use a more prescriptive-based regulation where we put up speed limit signs. There's lots of discussion about now whether some of the regulations need to move from the more performance-based to more prescription of telling the industry exactly what to do. Who's noticed these problems? Over the last few years, a whole rash of people have noticed the problems. Congress certainly has weighed in on this and asked PHMSA to do a number of things. Linda's going to talk about that, I'm sure. NTSB has, the Government Accountability Office has, the Inspector General, Department of Transportation has, certainly the affected public has, and the industry themselves have even noted some of these things and committed to moving things forward with or without the regulations. You know, there's been much attention that there was movement in 2010 when Congress was dealing with the reauthorization of the Pipeline Safety Act. There was a whole lot of attention to regulations, and there seemed to be a lot of movement. And then things seemed to, from the public standpoint, stalled. In October of 2010, there was a major rulemaking announced by PHMSA for liquid pipelines. And then in August of 2011, there was a major rulemaking announced for gas transmission pipelines. You know, those are 2 and 3 years out now, and they kind of went into a black hole and haven't resurfaced again. So that causes people to ask, where are the regulations and what's taking so long? One of the things about transparency, you can actually see where the regulations are. Like this is the hazardous liquid rule that came out in 2010. You can go to the Department of Transportation's website under the Secretary's office, and it shows who submitted what, when, and where the holdup is. So you can look at this, and you can see for the hazardous liquid rule that PHMSA actually gave that to them in June of 2012. And it's been sitting there. It looks like it was resubmitted in September 2012, and it's been sitting at the Secretary's office ever since. Why is it sitting at the Secretary's office? Here's the same one with gas transmission, and it says that PHMSA is supposed to give that to the Secretary's office in October, last month. There's no updated dates on here, and Linda could probably talk about that. But there is some transparency in where the holdup is, and as Cynthia was talking about, there's multiple phases of this from PHMSA to the Secretary's office, and then it has to go to the White House before it bounces back and starts going through the next phase of the process. So what's the holdup? And that's my setup to let Linda explain that to us.